Hey seniors, Concord University Mountain Lions. Shout out to Concord. I got some former students down there. Taylor Perry, Dylan Brassey, Mallory Hendrick, Alexis Bowles went there. Probably some others that I'm forgetting. Concord, shout out to you. Speaking of colleges, I'm gonna show you seniors something. Every year in the front of the class, I usually start this in January, but we have the Midland Trail Senior College Wall of Fame because all of you are on the trail to a better you. When you are seniors, when you are accepted to a college, university, or technical school, show me proof, and then I will get a really cool certificate of excellence up here on the College Wall of Fame. Now, I started out with the only two right now that I know of. Number one, Cy Persinger. He's been accepted to these colleges here, but he has signed at Wesleyan, West Virginia Wesleyan, to play baseball. And I also know, of course, of Indy, my own son, who's been accepted to these colleges, and he is already given a verbal commitment to. Sorry about dropping my phone there. Let's go back. He's already given a verbal commitment to West Virginia Wesleyan for the golf team. So I know of these two guys, and I hope to see this whole wall right here just get filled up with all of you seniors as you go on to further your education from Midland Trail. So as you guys get accepted to colleges and universities, bring that stuff in to me and we'll get that up on the wall for you. Big time in your life right now. It's a big time. Now, it's time for a whole new unit. We just came through Unit 2, and it talked about the Bill of Rights and the amendments. I left some of them out. I can't believe that I didn't put Amendment 12, which is the amendment that set up the Electoral College in there. And of course, now that is all over the news with the election. Forgot about Amendment 12. That's my bad. But we already know that. We talked about a lot of the Electoral College in our class. And the Electoral College is a key vocabulary word in another unit coming up when we talk about the executive branch and the presidency. So we'll be able to, we'll backtrack and pick up that. At any rate, we finished Unit 2 about the amendments and your rights and responsibilities as citizens. All of those things were due on last Friday, and I've got a whole slew of notifications where y'all were trying to get those things in on time, and some of you were late, but most of you were putting those in on time. This is now Unit 3. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into each branch of government. In Unit 1, you learned about the 3 branches of government, the checks and balances that our government has and that our Constitution has put in place. And the very first branch of government we're going to do is the legislative branch. Unit 3, the legislative branch. Now, let's think for a minute. Think. Ashton Hudspeth, do you remember what the legislative branch does? I couldn't hear you too well, but I think you said the legislative branch makes laws. Yes, you're right, Ashton. Very good. Let's make sure you get out your notebook and pencil. It is time to take good notes. Unit 3. Remember to pause this at any time. The legislative branch. It makes our laws, and at the federal level, guess what? Our legislative branch is known as Congress. Congress. Right now, that seems like a little bad word because Congress can't seem to get anything done a lot but fight around, argue, and like Alex Ellison said, why can't our country work together and progress as a country and move forward instead of letting party politics get in the way? So, Alex, that was a real wise saying. I don't know the answer to that. But this unit is about the legislative branch, Congress, at our federal level. Now, one of the things that are in our, one of our vocabulary words is a really cool word called gerrymandering. I mean, I want you to just say that to yourself right now. I'll give you a second. Just say gerrymandering. Yeah, kind of a cool word, huh? It's like saying onomatopoeia. It's just one of those cool words to say. But It's very difficult to explain, so I have to activate and talk to you about a story from an athlete here from Fayette County. It's the best way I know to explain gerrymandering. And then, of course, what I'm going to do is I'm going to include this little video clip about gerrymandering. I'll include it into Schoology, and you can watch it yourself. And it's about the animals in the jungle and how they decide to govern themselves, and they're using gerrymandering. And it's the best video I've ever found to help explain gerrymandering. So let's get your brain going. Gerrymandering, what is it? The best way to describe gerrymandering to you is take you back into Fayette County into the late 1970s, where over in Scarborough, there was this incredible young athlete who was in middle school at Mount Hope Middle School, and his name was Timmy McMillan. And this athlete was an incredible player in any sport, and he was just in the 8th grade. Dunk a basketball when he's 8th grade, throw a football 55 yards in the air when he was in the 8th grade. He could hit a home run plumb out 400 feet over the fence when he was in 8th grade. Just an incredible athlete. And he would have been going from Mount Hope Middle School to Mount Hope High School as a freshman. That summer, mysteriously, and we can all maybe figure out why, but the Fayette County Board of Education redrew their school district lines. They redrew them, redesigned them, and redrew them. And all of a sudden, the area of Scarborough where Timmy McMillan lived was included and drawn into the Oak Hill High School district. So now, where was Timmy McMillan going to go to high school at? Mount Hope or Oak Hill? Because they redrew the district lines, Timmy McMillan now went as a freshman to Oak Hill High School, where he played for the legendary Coach Lilly and the legendary Coach Epp. Coach Epperly played baseball for Coach Epperly there at Oak Hill, and won many state championships, and there's still legends about how far he hit a baseball one time that Coach Epp always tells me that story. And this incredible athlete, this young man eventually signed to play professional baseball with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I always think, when I think of gerrymandering and how counties can redraw district lines to include voters, I always think of how, in Timmy McMillan's case, our board office redrew the school district lines, and Timmy McMillan went on to Oak Hill High School instead of Mount Hope High School. Just a little story, just a little history. Timmy McMillan, incredible young man, incredible athlete. I remember watching him play, and that's how I remember what gerrymandering is. So now I'm going to include a video in here about gerrymandering, a video in Schoology, so that you can watch it, and it will explain it a little bit further, but that's one of the words that we're going to have to define in this section of notes. So you have your notes ready. Now this is what I want you to do here. I want you to think about a time when you had to compromise. Think about a time when you had to compromise about something. You ever had to compromise? I bet Seth, I bet you, do you ever have to compromise with Matty Berry sometimes? I like to tell this story all the time. I can tell you about a time when I had to compromise. Seth, you might understand this and appreciate this. Well, Jackie wanted a dog. I didn't want a dog. So we compromised and got a dog. Seth, yeah, that's right. You compromise and we got a dog. Compromise is where both sides give a little to come up with something. If I ever get to see you back in school, maybe some of you guys can tell me about a time when you had to compromise. But I always remember that story. And I always like to tell it because it's kind of funny, but it's true. But when they were creating our Constitution, you have to understand that it would not have been done without compromise. There were 13 original states. Some of them had larger populations than the other. So when it came to making the legislative branch, they had an argument on their hands because some of the states believed that every state should get to send the same amount of people to Congress as representatives from their state. And other states believed that they should get to send more people to Congress to represent them because they had more of a population. For example, Virginia was huge. Virginia had a huge population of people. It all started out with a Jamestown colony, and it grew and grew and grew, and now the state of Virginia had a lot of people living in it. Virginia said that they should have more people in Congress because they had more people that lived there. Now, Rhode Island, they were a smaller state. They didn't have as many people as Virginia, so they didn't like that idea. And they said that every state should get to send the same amount of people to Congress, the same amount of representatives to Congress. And of course, this was an argument that held up the framers of our Constitution for quite some time when they argued and tried to hash out this new Constitution, how our government was going to be set up. And of course, we all know, Article 2, Article 3. But there's a whole specific article in the Constitution that dealt with how Congress was set up. And this was an argument that they couldn't settle for a long time, for a while. And you can see why, because if you were a small state, you would not want to be outvoted on everything. But if you were a larger state, you would feel like you should have more say. They finally had to come up with a compromise. Remember, I compromised and got a dog. They had to compromise. Both sides had to come to an agreement. And it became known as the Great Compromise. The Great Compromise. I always think about Halloween with that. When I think about Charlie Brown, the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. But you think about the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, the Great Compromise. Now this is what they did. And that's actually the answer to EQ number 1. So how did they determine membership in Congress? What they did was they divided Congress into two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. This was their great compromise. Congress has two parts to it, the Senate and the House of Representatives. How did they work it? How was membership determined in each house? In the Senate, each state gets 2, the same amount. Every state gets 2 in the Senate. That's kind of what Rhode Island wanted. Rhode Island got 2 senators. What about Virginia? 2. What about Pennsylvania? 2. And this is carried on even today. How many senators does Wyoming get? 2. What about Hawaii? Aloha, aloha. 2. Montana? 2. The big state of Texas, they get 2 senators. Every state gets 2. That made Rhode Island happy. But now look at what they did for the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is obviously based on your state's population. And that made Virginia happy. The Great Compromise. It divided Congress into 2 houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Every state gets 2 senators, and the House of Representatives, well, that number is based off your state's population. Remember to pause this and take really good notes. And I'll talk to you about that for a little bit. So how does that apply to us today? Well, you as a West Virginian, a rednecked West Virginian, by God, West Virginia, you should know that we have 3 representatives in the House from West Virginia. Now, you should also know that we have 2 senators, just like every other state. So there are 5 people in Congress representing the great state of West by God, Virginia. 5 of them. And we're going to go over their names here in a little bit. But we have those people representing us as mountaineers. What about California? Well, you already know how many senators they get. 2. But they have like 53 representatives in the House because California has a tremendous amount of people, much more of a population than we have here in West Virginia. So this was the great compromise our founding fathers put in. And that's why Congress has 2 houses, 2 sections, the Senate and the House. The Senate, every state gets 2. The House is based on your state's population. Now you know that. Now let's go down to, and honestly too, they take that. That's how the Electoral College is set up. And we're going to go over the Electoral College in Unit 4. But the Electoral College, the number of votes each state gets in the Electoral College is based off your representation in Congress. That's why West Virginia is worth 5 electoral votes in the Electoral College in a presidential election. That's why. Now let's move on down to take EQ number 2. How many members are in the House and how many members total are in the Senate? Now I expect you to know the Senate. Let's put on your math skills. Let's make Miss Haynes proud. Okay? All right. Come on, Matty Berry. If we have 50 states and every state gets 2 senators, you got it, 100. There are 100 in the Senate. So let's write that down. How many members are in the House and the Senate? Well, there are a total of 100 senators. Now, for the House, I don't expect you to know that because the House has a set number, and that number is appropriated and distributed out to the states for their number of representatives based on your state's population. They do a census every 10 years. So it is possible with this year's census that West Virginia could, if our population is growing tremendously, we might get another representative in Congress, and another state who loses population would lose one. That is possible, and it does happen. But that number in the House of Representatives that's split up between all of the states based on their population is this number right here. There are 435 people in the House. So, let's put our thinking cap on again. Are you ready? Olivia Burford. How many total people are there in Congress then? If there are 100 in the House, 435 in the House, and 100 in the Senate, you guessed it, Olivia, your math is good. There are 535 people in Congress. And how many of that 535 people sitting there making laws for our country represent West Virginia? You guessed it, 5. So 5 out of those 535 people represent our great state in Congress. And they run our country. Now this is where the important part is. I want you to make sure that you know who our 2 senators are from West Virginia because they represent you. Right there they are. Joe Manchin, Shelley Capito. Shelley Capito just won re-election. Joe Manchin doesn't come up for re-election for another 2 years maybe. And our representatives from West Virginia in the House are David McKinley, Alex Mooney, and Carol Miller. Now, if you're wondering what the R is, I put their political parties there. All of our representatives in the House are Republicans from West Virginia. If you go back up to our senators, Shelley Capito is a Republican, and Joe Manchin is the only Democrat who represents us from our state. Now, if you ever have trouble remembering these representatives, I always think about my favorite snack. Look at this. M&Ms. Oh, let me get back here. M&Ms. Don't you love M&Ms? So I always think of M&Ms because all of their last names right there start with M's. McKinley, Mooney, and Miller. Now we're going to get to the next essential question. And I want you to think about What kind of qualifications should we have to be in the House? What kind of qualifications should a person have to be in Congress? What qualifications should a person have to be a senator? Or a member of the House of Representatives. These people are going to be making laws that run our country. They should have some pretty stiff qualifications, wouldn't they? And let me think a minute. I would think that they should maybe have at least a high school diploma, maybe a college degree in law, right? Well, I think the qualifications in the Constitution will surprise you. They are not really quite what you would consider if you were thinking of qualifications for today, for jobs or anything. Now remember, this Constitution was written in 1787, which has been a few years. So there wasn't a lot of high schools and colleges and things at that time. But I want you to, I think that the qualifications to be in Congress, according to the Constitution, are not quite what you think they are. But let's take a look. And they're different. There are certain qualifications to be in the Senate, to be a senator, and then there are different qualifications to be in the House of Representatives. And here they are. We'll start with the Senate side first. To be in the Senate, there's only three. It has nothing to do with a college degree or anything. You have to be at least 30 years old. You have to be a United States citizen for at least 9 years. And you must live in the state that you represent. That makes sense. You know, Joe Manchin represents us in West Virginia. He must live here. If he doesn't, how can he, live in Alaska and represent us as West Virginians and what we believe and what we think are important? So that's a good qualification. You must live in our state. That's the Senate. The House of Representatives is basically the same thing. It's just not quite as stringent with the numbers. Take a look here. To be a member of the House of Representatives in Congress, you have to be 25 years old. You have to be a U.S. citizen for only 7 years, and you must also live in the state that you represent. Now, when you look at those qualifications, you really and truthfully, they're not quite that tough. You don't qualify for either one of these. I do, just because I'm older than you, way older. Now, I think it's also important here, and I don't think I had this, but I'm going to scroll back up here and let you know something important, because I think it's important for us to note this, and I'm going to write it down. The Senate is a 6-year term in Congress. They're elected and serve for six years. The House, when they're elected, they serve in a 2-year term. Now think about that. The House is in there for 2 years, the President is in there for 4 years, and the Senator is in there for 6 years. I wonder why they have all these different term limits, term conditions, I guess, on these people in government. But if you think about it, every 2 years, more House of Representatives are coming in. Every 4 years, we have a presidential election. And then every 6 years, the Senate changes over with different people in their terms. So it was designed to constantly have an influx of new people with new ideas on how to help run our country and make laws for our country. So that's interesting how our Constitution was set up that way. Now we have to go back. We've talked about the qualifications. Now we have just a few vocabulary words to put in. And vocabulary number 1 is apportioned, means distributed. Those 435 seats in the House are apportioned out to the states based on the state's population, and every 10 years the census may change that distribution a little bit. Hopefully, West Virginia will not lose any representatives in the House after this new census in 2020, but we'll see. Hopefully, we can still keep our 3 reps in the House. Now, gerrymandering. Remember how they redrew the school lines so that Timmy McMillan could go to Oak Hill High School? Well, gerrymandering is the redrawing of district lines in order to favor a certain political party, a politician, or a group. Now, I'm going to put a video in Schoology so that you can watch a video about gerrymandering and all the animals in the jungle, and that will help explain gerrymandering a little bit more for you. One of the things I always laugh at when I think about franking privilege, we just came through Halloween, and I always think of the Frankenstein monster, and he's walking. I always think of him when I think about franking privilege. But all members of Congress, they have a franking privilege. And what that means is they have the right to mail official packages and letters for free. Or in the words of Adam Sandler from Bedtime Stories, for free. And that's called, or known as, a franking privilege. And the last word is immunity. Members of Congress have some form of legal protection while they're in session. The idea behind that is they have a very important job to do. And that job is to, make laws, run our country. So while they're in session, they get a certain level of immunity, legal protection while they're in office to do that. Well, that concludes our first section of notes about Congress. So I hope you took good notes. There'll be an assignment in Schoology about how Congress is set up, and it'll just be questions from these notes for you to answer. And I'll see you on the next video. So until then, keep applying to colleges, and I'll put you up there on the College Wall of Fame. And let's just keep working towards a good school year and making it the best that we can with Schoology. So hang in there, and I hope to see you guys very soon because I miss all of you. I want to, like at the beginning when I asked you, have you ever had a time when you had to compromise about something? See, I love to be able to go around the classroom and ask those examples so that y'all can tell me and we can laugh about a certain time when you had to compromise, or we could pick on Seth and Maddie Berry because we know Seth has to compromise. Probably the way I had to compromise with my wife about a dog. We compromised and got a dog. But I like to hear all those stories, but you're not here, so we can't go around the room and talk about it. So I miss all of you. But until then, you know the great compromise, Congress divided into two houses. You know how that's set up a little bit. Look for the worksheet assignment on Schoology, and I will see you as soon as I can. And the next video will come out probably next week about Lesson 2 of Unit 3 as we continue to study about Congress. Till then, we'll talk to you later.